Hello, Robo people! Welcome to a brand new episode of Inside RoboCo, a series all about our sandbox game, RoboCo. Joining me today is Carter Williams, one of RoboCo's amazing game engineers, for a closer look at the physics behind RoboCo.
The world in RoboCo is actually sized down by like a factor of 10. So 1 unit of space in RoboCo is like a decimeter or a tenth of a meter. The idea there being that in a game engine like Unity, normally a unit, you can make it mean whatever you want it to mean, but oftentimes you make it mean that it's like 1 metric unit of space, then you can use the metric system for all of your physics. But because of the way that collisions are calculated, really small spaces end up missing collisions sometimes. So by scaling the world by a factor of 10, we're able to trick Unity into thinking that a small space is actually kind of big. But the consequences of that that trickle down are that now whenever we do our physics calculations to make them match the real world, we need to multiply them by a factor of 10 for every time there's a unit of distance in the calculation. So that makes it pretty different when we're trying to get real world-ish values coming out of the game. Yeah, so one thing you might know is that in a lot of video games, gravity is not 9.89 or whatever gravity actually is on Earth. In the video game, a lot of times it's a lot heavier to make things fall quicker. In our game, because the world is scaled, you have to divide gravity by about 10 to get what it would actually be. Our gravity actually turns out to be about negative 0.8 meters per second, which is like just below what gravity actually is on Earth. We don't totally know why it's negative 8 or exactly where we landed on that number, but we did land on that number. And now we've built a lot of levels. And now all of those levels kind of depend on that negative 80 in Unity terms gravity. So we really don't want to change that number now. So now the world on which RoboCo takes place is properly sized. The planet's radius is just right so that the gravity is negative 8 meters per second. One thing that comes to mind is when you're debugging physics. A lot of the time when we're debugging our code, we like to just like put our finger on the code and like walk through it to get to like where you want to go essentially. Or you can make your program stop on a certain line of code and then step and you look at like, oh, what is happening? Because most of the physics code is running in the engine and isn't actually in the same language we're even writing in, we can't step through it. So what we have to do is try to just get values that we think are important and then like put them on a readout that we can read as we're playing the game, or we can visualize. A lot of the time there's like 3D math that's happening and we can kind of visualize, like put a little thing where we think that the point should be in the direction that it should be facing, and then like look at it as we're playing, which is really different compared to, you know, testing, am I moving this data through this database right, or something like that. Your piston, it's like at a certain size and it expands out to a certain size. And we want to make that expansion happen, but we can't like make its collider grow because that would be like moving things around. And we don't like to move things around. We like physics to do all of the moving around. So what we end up doing is just duplicating the collider and having them overlap, and then they just like slide past each other. So it grows just by like having the spring that is pulling the piston out just moves the colliders so that instead of overlapping, they're next to each other. And then when we finally made the telescoping piston, we like realized that with the telescoping piston has a bunch of different overlapping things that unoverlap, just like a telescoping piston would. Generally don't like humans to get slapped in the face. When humans get slapped in the face, they get mad. And if you played the game, you might have realized that. But when you complete a level, we wanted all the humans to clap, and sometimes the humans hold clipboards. And what would happen is that you would complete a level, and then the human with the clipboard would start clapping, and they would whack themselves in the face with their clipboard, and then either like knock themselves out or get really mad. Yeah, and we had to just basically there's a check in there that if the human is clapping, like their tolerance for forces just around their hands and head and everything just like goes way up. They're willing to get punched while they're clapping because they've like signed up to be in a volatile physical environment. What we want to say, okay, so I have this gear spinning and I have this other gear that's touching it, and I want to take like maybe the rotation that's happening here and I want to like link it to the rotation that's happening with that gear, and maybe there's some ratio going involved. We want to like set that relationship up for the Unity engine, but instead what we have to do is say, or what we're currently doing, we've explored other options, but at the moment the solution is where the gears are touching, we put like a spring joint between them. And we can maybe drive the forces going between them, but pretty much the gears are just pulling on each other from the teeth. And that can lead to slippage, and the math in actually getting the gears to turn the right way using only springs gets kind of complicated. Magnets are really cool. I'd love to have a robot that has a magnet in it, especially now with like programming. If I could have an electromagnet that I turn on and off, things like thrusters to build like, spaceships, Kerbal space program-esque stuff. That sounds like it'd be really fun to get around to doing.
And that's it for this episode of Inside RoboCo. What was the coolest thing you learned from this episode? Leave a comment down below and subscribe so you don't miss more behind-the-scenes content with our team. You can also find links to our Steam page, Discord, website, and social media accounts in the description box below. See you guys next time!